The silent revenge of a best friend, unveiled at the peak of her companion's happiness, even before the I do is the kind of truth that explodes like a bomb. That's exactly what happened on the morning of Bruna's wedding, a day that promised to be the happiest of her life, and which instead became the stage for a revelation that would change everything. In that moment of pure adrenaline, while the universe seemed to conspire in favor of a lie, only one person had the power to expose the truth. Carol, the maid of honor, the soul sister, the best friend the bride didn't deserve, but whom destiny made sure to place in her path. If you are interested in stories of twists and justice, those that touch the soul and make us reflect on the strength of friendship and love, be sure to subscribe to our channel, as more than 90% of the people who listen to our stories are not yet subscribed. Your subscription is what drives us to continue. The story of Bruna and Daniel was the fairy tale everyone loved to hear. They met in college, amidst architecture classes and late night projects. Daniel, tall, with eyes that promised a future and a smile that disarmed anyone, won Bruna over with a charm that seemed natural. Their relationship evolved amidst coffees, plans for the future, and the construction of a love that seemed solid, unshakable. Bruna, with her passion for art and a raw sensitivity, saw in Daniel the safe harbor she had always sought. Her parents adored him, and Daniel's family, though more reserved, seemed to have accepted Bruna as a daughter. However, for Carol, the best friend, the equation never seemed so perfect. She knew Bruna like no one else, with all her frailties and dreams, and saw in her friend's relationship a sparkle that didn't reach her, a forced spark. She tried to ignore that feeling, attributing the intuition to an irrational fear of losing her best friend to marriage. Bruna and Carol's childhood was shaped by a silent promise of loyalty. They grew up together in a small town where afternoons were spent in the backyard under the shade of a mango tree. Bruna, the dreamer, imagined a grand future, painting canvases and building castles in the air. Carol, the more practical one, was always there to anchor her, to hold her hand when fear became too great. Their friendship was made of simple gestures, of looks that spoke louder than words, and of a mutual understanding that transcended the need for explanation. Bruna's wedding was the realization of one of her friend's great dreams, and Carol, as maid of honor, was dedicated to making sure everything turned out perfect. But deep down, a voice inside her whispered that something was wrong, something that didn't fit the ideal image of Daniel. The coldness he showed Bruna in moments of intimacy, the constant excuses to spend a time with her family, and the way he avoided talking about his past were signs Carol couldn't ignore. On the wedding day, the tension in the air was almost palpable, but not from common nervousness. Bruna, radiant in her white dress, seemed the personification of happiness. Daniel, elegantly dressed, smiled at the guests, looking like the perfect groom. The ceremony was scheduled for 11 a.m., and time seemed to drag on for Carol. She felt suffocated, torn between her friend's happiness and the intuition that warned her of an imminent danger. She tried several times to talk to Bruna about it, but her friend, completely engrossed in the preparations and the dream of the wedding, ignored her. You're exaggerating, Carol. Don't be jealous, Bruna would say, with a laugh that was more nervous than sincere. Carol then realized she needed more than intuition. She needed proof, a certainty, something that could expose the truth and make her friend see what she couldn't. With a racing heart, she decided to wait, observing every move of Daniel, every word, every gesture, in search of a clue that would confirm her fears. The air in the dressing room was dense, filled with perfume and nervousness. Bruna, with eyes welling up with joy, looked at herself in the mirror, the lace veil cascading down her back. It's a dream, Carol. I can't believe this is happening, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Carol, forcing a smile, held back tears. She felt a weight in her chest, a gloomy premonition that contrasted with her friend's happiness. For a moment, she considered speaking, telling her about the small inconsistencies she had noticed in Daniel, about how he seemed to avoid the subject of his past, about the coldness that, at times, hung in the air when they were alone. But Bruna's conviction was unshakable. Bruna believed in a fairy tale, and Carol, deep down, feared ruining everything, of being the villain of the story, the destroyer of dreams. It was a cruel dilemma, a clash between loyalty to friendship and the need to protect her friend from a danger that, perhaps, existed only in her imagination. Therefore, if you like narratives that explore the complexity of human emotions, moral dilemmas, and the ups and downs of life, consider subscribing to our channel. Your support helps us continue to tell stories that make us think and feel. And more than 90% of the people who listen to us are not yet subscribed. The tension intensified when Bruna's mother entered the room, crying with emotion. She hugged them both, and her words of gratitude echoed in the space. You are a daughter to me, Carol. Thank you for being by her side at all times, she said, moved. That tight hug made Carol's heart break into 1,000 pieces. The lie, the omission, seemed even heavier in the face of that unconditional love. A few meters away, in the hallway, Daniel was talking to his best man, his expression serious. He didn't show the joy expected of a groom on his wedding day. His eyes, which seemed so bright to Bruna, were dull and distant, focused on the floor. Carol, watching him from a distance, felt a shiver. That wasn't the man Bruna loved, wasn't the man the bride described with such affection. It was a mask, a well-woven cloak, to hide a dark truth. When Daniel moved away from the best man, Carol felt it was her chance. She needed something concrete, irrefutable proof for Bruna. Discreetly, she approached the hallway, hiding behind a pillar, and waited for the right moment. That's when Daniel's cell phone rang. He looked at the device with a start, and with a trembling hand, answered the call. His tone of voice changed, becoming lower, more urgent, as if he was afraid of being heard. No, I can't. I thought you understood. Our deal is on. I need the money to disappear, and this wedding is my chance. Her family is rich, and her father has money that would help me get out of this hell, he whispered, his voice full of hate and urgency. Carol's world collapsed. Daniel's words, spoken with a frightening coldness, were what she feared to hear. It wasn't about love, but a plan, a farce orchestrated to steal money. Daniel's dark past, which he so avoided, was a debt to dangerous people. That wedding wasn't a fairy tale, but a business, a scam. He was marrying Bruna for money, get rid of a past of mistakes and lies. Carol felt her stomach churn. The pain in Bruna's chest, when she discovered the truth, would be more than she could bear. Carol knew she had to act, but the abrupt revelation, the lack of time, and the presence of the guests made the plan to expose the truth impossible. The groom, Daniel, continued to talk on the phone, his voice becoming lower and lower. I know, I know. Don't worry. I'll get the old man's money, and we'll disappear. After this wedding, no one will find us anymore. That sentence, full of malice and coldness, made Carol shudder. She needed to act, but how? How to expose the truth without causing total chaos? She felt tears stream down her cheeks. It was her friend's happiest day, and she would have to ruin it to save her from a cruel fate. She was caught between loyalty and truth, and the decision she would make would define the destiny of her friendship and her best friend. Time seemed to have frozen. The sound of Daniel's cell phone echoed in the hallway, his voice low and urgent, transforming the magical atmosphere of the wedding into a scenario of a dark suspense. Carol, still hidden, felt a chill run down her spine. With every word Daniel said, the image of the perfect groom that everyone admired disintegrated into a cold and calculating villain. Don't worry, I'll get the old man's money and we'll disappear. The phrase echoed in Carol's mind over and over again. The old man was Bruna's father, the man who had treated her with affection and had welcomed her into his home. The family he had sworn to love and respect was, in fact, a means to an end. The wedding was not an act of love, but a transaction, a scam to get rid of a turbulent past. That moment of revelation, of breaking the illusion, was the turning point for Carol. She knew she needed to do something, but she couldn't just enter the dressing room and expose the truth. Bruna's emotion, the joy the bride felt, was a barrier that Carol couldn't cross. The bride was at the height of happiness, about to realize a dream, and the truth, however necessary, could destroy her. Carol felt suffocated, torn between her duty as a friend and the fear of causing Bruna unbearable pain. Her mind raced, looking for a way to act, to expose the betrayal without causing a scandal. She remembered all the moments they had lived together, the promise to be there for each other. Carol couldn't let her friend marry a man who was using her. It was then that an idea, risky and audacious, formed in her mind. She couldn't shout the truth, but she could whisper it in a way that only Bruna could understand. With a racing heart, she waited for the moment when Daniel hung up his cell phone and put it in his pocket. He then walked towards the altar with the expression of a man about to win a dirty game. The ceremony began, the guests settled in their places, and the music, once cheerful, seemed to have a somber tone for Carol. The bride entered, stunning, accompanied by her father. Her radiant smile was a reflection of the happiness she felt, and Daniel, at the altar, smiled, but his eyes remained cold, distant. Carol observed every move, every look. While the officiant spoke about love, loyalty, and commitment, Carol, sitting in the front row, felt her chest tighten. She needed a sign, a chance. The ceremony progressed, and when the officiant reached the vows part, Bruna and Daniel turned to each other, their gazes meeting. It was her chance. Carol, with a trembling hand, took out her cell phone and, discreetly, sent a message to Bruna. A simple message, but one that carried the weight of a cruel truth. Trust me, Bruna. Look at Daniel's hand. See if there's anything different. Bruna, who was holding a bouquet, felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. With discretion, she took it out, read the message, and looked at Daniel. Daniel's expression was one of pure serenity, but his hand, which Bruna noticed for the first time, was trembling. He was holding Bruna's bouquet, and his hand, the same one that was hidden in his pocket when he was on the phone, was clenched in a tight fist. Bruna, with Carol's message still in her mind, looked at the groom carefully. That's when she saw something that made her question everything. He was wearing an engagement ring on his ring finger, but it was gold, and hers was silver. Bruna, who had always been passionate about rings, was sure that Daniel's ring was silver. That subtle difference, which most people wouldn't notice, was the first clue to Carol's plan. The bride, then, read Carol's second message. He has the gold engagement ring, and his is silver. Don't do anything. Just look at the bouquet. Bruna, confused, looked at the bouquet Daniel was holding. In the middle of the flowers, a folded note was attached to one of the petals. The air in the church seemed heavier than ever. The officiant continued his speech, but the gazes, once focused on the bride and groom, were now directed at Daniel and Bruna, who seemed to be in a world of their own. Bruna, with Carol's note in her hands, felt her trembling increase. She unfolded the paper carefully and read what was written. The message was short, but it had the weight of 1,000 tons. He's using you. He betrayed you for money. The wedding is a scam. Forgive me for this, but I can't let you marry a liar. Carol's handwriting was unmistakable. Bruna looked at Daniel. With the bouquet in his hand and the coldness in his eyes seemed to have a different meaning now. A shiver ran through Bruna, a feeling that everything she had lived with Daniel was a lie. His coldness, the constant excuses not to talk about the past, the way he avoided her family. Everything fit together now, like pieces of a cruel puzzle. Her heart, which was once full of happiness, now seemed to have been crushed into 1,000 pieces. The betrayal was a painful blow. The bride, with trembling legs, felt dizziness approaching, but she couldn't fall. She couldn't cry. She had to be strong. She had to face the truth. It was then that Bruna, with the note still in her hand, looked at Carol, who had teary eyes. Carol's look was one of despair and a silent plea for forgiveness. The bride understood everything. There was no betrayal in the friendship, but an act of love, a love so strong that it risked ruining a wedding to save her friend from a future of pain. Bruna felt a mixture of emotions, the pain of betrayal, the anger of deception, but also a deep gratitude. Her best friend was there for her, even in the most difficult moments. At the height of the tension, Bruna looked at her father, who was watching her with an expression of surprise. She, with a choked voice, looked at Daniel and said, "I can't say yes. I can't marry you." The silence in the church was deafening. The guests looked at each other, confused. Daniel, who had turned to Bruna to say his vows, felt his face contort with rage. "What are you saying? What happened?" he said, in a threatening whisper. Bruna, ignoring his tone of voice, continued, "You're a liar, Daniel. You used my family to get rid of your past. You deceived me." Daniel, with his mask falling, tried to defend himself. "You're crazy, Bruna. What are you talking about?" But the panic in his eyes was evident. He knew the game was over. Bruna, with the bouquet in her hands, showed him the note. Daniel, shocked, looked at the ring on his hand and, in an act of desperation, tried to take it off, but it was too late. Bruna's father, who had approached, took the ring from Daniel's hand and looked at it carefully. He didn't need anything else to understand the situation. Bruna's reaction of rejecting the groom at the altar was a shock to everyone. But what followed was even more surprising. The bride didn't cry. She didn't fall apart in tears. Instead, she looked at her best friend with a smile and said, "Thank you, Carol. You saved my life." Ceremony, which was supposed to be the culmination of a couple's love, became a moment of union between two friends. Bruna turned and, without hesitation, held Carol's hand. Bruna's father, who had understood the situation, approached them and hugged them both, with tears in his eyes. Daniel, with a pale face and defeat stamped in his eyes, tried to flee, but Bruna's father stopped him. What seemed like the end of a dream turned into a new beginning. Bruna and Carol, holding hands, left the altar, with their heads held high, freed from a deception. The guests, stunned, watched a celebration of friendship. Bruna and Carol's exit from the church, holding hands, shocked everyone. The music, which was once a festive melody, was replaced by a heavy silence and the whispers of the guests that echoed through the nave. On Bruna's face, there was no sadness, but a mixture of relief and gratitude. The truth, however painful, freed her from a lie that was imprisoning her. Carol, feeling her friend's hand firmly in hers, felt the peace of having done the right thing. What seemed like the end of a dream turned into the beginning of a new one. The two, united, walked out of the church, leaving behind the stage of the lie, and heading towards the car that was waiting for them. In the back seat, Bruna, who for minutes seemed strong, broke down in tears. "How could he? Carol, how could he use me? I loved him. I trusted him," she said, her voice choked. Carol hugged her tightly. "I know, friend. I know. But he didn't deserve you. No one deserves you. And you're not alone. I'm here. We'll get through this together," she whispered, stroking her friend's hair. Bruna's tears were of pain, but also of relief, of liberation from a love that never existed. As the car drove away from the church, Bruna looked back to the place where her princess dream became a nightmare. She felt no regret, but the certainty that she had made the right choice. At home, the atmosphere was one of sadness. Bruna's parents, shocked and speechless, sat on the sofa. Carol, with a glass of sugar water in her hand, sat next to Bruna. He's in jail. Bruna's father called the police. He confessed that the wedding was a scam. He owed money to loan sharks and used Bruna to escape the debt, Bruna's mother said, in a low, almost inaudible tone of voice. The news was a confirmation of what Carol already knew, but the pain was inevitable. The bride heard the words, but she didn't seem surprised. Her pain was in her heart, in a feeling of having been deceived and used, not only by the man she loved, but also by a love she believed was true. The night was long. Bruna couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel smile, the sweet words he said to her, and felt a pang in her stomach. She couldn't believe that a man she loved could have done something so cruel. The next morning, Bruna looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes were swollen. She was no longer the girl who believed in fairy tales. She was a woman who was hurt, but who had risen from the ashes. She needed time to heal, to find herself. Time passed, and Bruna, with the help of Carol and her family, got back on her feet. She stopped painting, dedicating herself to her art. Her spirit, which was once cheerful and vibrant, seemed to have gone out. The pain of betrayal was deep, but Carol's friendship was what kept her going. Carol was always there, to comfort her, to hug her, to be her safe harbor. The friendship between the two, which was already strong, became unshakable. They were proof that friendship can be as strong as love, and that, in times of pain, friendship can be your salvation. If you connect with stories about true friendship and the strength of the human spirit to overcome adversity, consider subscribing to our channel, as more than 90% of the people who listen to us are not yet subscribed. Your support is what allows us to continue telling inspiring stories. Bruna's pain didn't disappear overnight, but with time and Carol's support, it transformed into strength. The broken wedding became a turning point. Bruna began to see life differently. She abandoned the dream of a perfect relationship and began to focus on herself, on her own desires and longings. She decided that her happiness would no longer depend on a man, a marriage, or an approval. She dedicated herself to a journey of self discovery, exploring places, cultures, and people to find her soul and her passion again. Carol, in turn, was always present, like a shadow, but she didn't invade her friend's space. She knew that Bruna needed time, space, to heal. She would send messages, call, send photos and videos of her daily life so that Bruna would know that even far away, she was present. The distance didn't weaken their friendship, but strengthened it. What was once a friendship of convenience became an unshakable bond built with trust, loyalty, and love. Every time Bruna felt the pain of loneliness, she remembered Carol's courage, her act of love, and the certainty that she was not alone propelled her to continue. On one of her trips, Bruna met a street artist who painted canvases with the colors of life. He wasn't handsome. He didn't have Daniel's charm, but his eyes were gentle and his soul was transparent. He taught her to paint again, to see the beauty in simple things, to find inspiration in life and not in a dream. He taught her that art is not to please other people, but to express the deepest feelings. Bruna, with the help of the artist, began to paint again. Her canvases, which were once dark and somber, became vibrant and colorful, full of life. A year passed, and Bruna returned home. She was stronger, more mature, happier. She had found her passion again, her soul, her smile. She was not the same girl who had fallen in love with a liar, but a woman who knew her worth, who knew that her happiness depended on herself. Carol, upon seeing her friend, felt her heart overflow with joy. She was no longer afraid of losing her friend to marriage, because their friendship had become unbreakable. Bruna and Carol, sitting in the backyard, under the shade of the mango tree, relived the memories of their childhood. The conversation flowed, and Bruna, with a smile, said, "You know, Carol, that my heart didn't break because of Daniel. But because of you, I don't know what I would do without you. You are my hero. You are my best friend. Bruna's sincere words filled Carol's heart with emotion. The two hugged, and in a gesture of gratitude, Bruna gave Carol her first canvas, painted after her return. The painting showed two girls holding hands, running in a field of flowers. The painting, which Bruna called Eternal Friendship, was a symbol of the strength of their friendship. What seemed like the end of a dream turned into a new beginning for the two, in a celebration of life, of love, and above all, of friendship. The twist in Bruna's life propelled her to do something she never imagined. She opened an art gallery, a space to exhibit her canvases, but also to exhibit the work of other artists who, like her, used art to heal, to express themselves, to find themselves. The gallery, which she called the Renaissance, became a refuge for artists, a place where pain was transformed into beauty, where sadness became inspiration. Her story, the story of a bride who was betrayed at the altar and who found her strength in art, became an inspiration to many. Bruna's gallery, which was a small studio, became a successful gallery known throughout the country. Carol, who was the gallery's administrator, was her business partner, her associate. They worked side by side, and the gallery became a symbol of their friendship. The gallery was what they had in common, the dream they built together. What was a career plan for Bruna became a life project for the two. They were inseparable, and their friendship was the basis of the gallery's success. Bruna no longer needed a man to be happy. She had her art, her gallery, her family, and above all, her best friend. In one of the gallery's exhibitions, Bruna met an architect who fell in love with her. He was gentle, respectful, and admired her work. He didn't pressure her, didn't rush her, but courted her with patience and affection. He loved her for who she was, for her art, for her story. He didn't see her as a victim, but as a survivor, a warrior. Bruna, who had closed her heart to love, felt her heart open again. She fell in love with him, for his intelligence, for his soul. Their love was different from the love she had with Daniel. It was a mature love, built with respect, trust, and admiration. When the architect proposed to her, Bruna didn't feel fear, but the certainty that she was making the right decision. She had found love again, but her love for him was different from her love for Daniel. It was a love that made her grow, that made her be the best version of herself. The wedding of Bruna and the architect, which she called the Renaissance of Love, was an intimate party with the presence of friends and family. Carol, who was the maid of honor, was by her side, as always. The celebration was not at the altar, but in a field of flowers, under the sunlight, the same field of flowers where the two girls, Bruna and Carol, ran in her painting. The ceremony was a celebration of love, but also of friendship, of forgiveness, of a new beginning. At the end of the ceremony, Bruna, with the bouquet in her hands, turned to Carol and handed her the painting that her friend had made in the past. You are my soul, Carol. You saved me. This painting is our symbol, the symbol of a friendship that resisted everything, that overcame betrayal, that made me who I am today. I love you, my sister, the bride said, emotional. Carol, with tears in her eyes, took the painting and hugged her friend. Their hug was a hug of souls, a hug of sisters, a hug that sealed a friendship that was more than friendship. It was family. The wedding was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new one, of a new love, of a new life, of a new dream. The couple, Bruna and the architect, traveled for their honeymoon, and Carol, with the painting in her hands, returned home. She sat on her sofa, looked at the painting, and smiled. Her friend's happiness was her happiness. Life, which seemed to have been cruel, had been kind. The pain was transformed into joy, the sadness into love, the betrayal into an unshakable friendship. What seemed like the end of a dream turned into a new beginning for the two. The friendship of Bruna and Carol is proof that love, true love, can be found in the people who are by your side in the most difficult moments. Their friendship was Bruna's salvation, her strength, her refuge, and their story is proof that love, true love, is by your side, waiting for you to open up to it. Years passed, and Bruna and Carol, who became mothers, continued to be best friends. The gallery, which was a small studio, became an empire. Their friendship was the basis of the success of their lives, their families, their businesses. They taught their children that true friendship is a treasure, that loyalty is a virtue, that love is the basis of everything. They proved that life is not a fairy tale, but a journey, and that the journey, however painful, can be transformed into a work of art. The story of Bruna and Carol is an ode to friendship, to love, to loyalty, to overcoming. It is the story of two women who came together to save one from a lie, and who, together, built an empire, a legacy, a friendship that lasted a lifetime. Their story is proof that the silent revenge of a best friend, unveiled at the height of her companion's happiness, can be the purest act of love. The friendship of Bruna and Carol was not just a friendship, but a pact, a commitment to be there for each other, no matter what happens. Their story, which began with the pain of a betrayal, ended with the celebration of an unconditional love, a love that is not based on promises, but on actions.